So Andrew, writing a book like this takes a lot of time, a lot of hard thinking, a lot of editing and redrafting. What would you say are the key things that you say in the book?
Okay. Well, I guess, as you say, after much thinking and indeed reflecting over 20 odd years in public policy, I decided that the best way to sort of try to organise what I think would be a good public policy program was under three main sort of pillars, as it were. So one is trying to provide immediate relief to struggling families, and that was particularly in the areas of housing prices and the impact of immigration on wages and community amenity and a raft of areas there. And those, I mention those two because they are those are areas not often not thought to be particularly part of an economic policy, but they relate very directly to how families and struggling workers are feeling, and so they're important to address both in their own right and also to create, as it were, the goodwill in the general public to be able to address other economic issues. And then the other two pillars of the economic agenda that I'm proposing are essentially strengthening the economy by boosting productivity and participation. So productivity is the most important thing that one needs to improve an economy. That's, as it were, the amount that we produce per hour. That's what fundamentally underpins our living standards, and it's productivity over the past few centuries that's underpinned the incredible rise in living standards of Western countries and now many other countries as well. The question is, how do you improve productivity? What is it that a federal government can do? There's a lot of talk in that area about areas like tax reform or welfare reform. The trouble is often they're general calls for tax reform or welfare reform without specifics as to what you do. And the trouble is we've actually spent a lot of time talking about them without much to show for it in the past 10 years. So I actually proposed three somewhat different areas. One of them is related to tax, but three somewhat different areas which I think are also critical and not nearly as much focused on, but are areas where we could achieve significant productivity improvements and which are achievable policy reforms. One critical one is in higher education reform. The current government's had a couple of goes at this. Each of those goes under Christopher Pyne and then under Simon Birmingham had some merits to it, but also had some serious flaws. I think, however, there's a way through that debate which would both be significantly improve our higher education system, significantly improve its quality, realign incentives to ensure universities actually care about the quality of the education they're providing to their students.
That'd be a help.
And yet would also be very popular, I think. You can craft a reform package that would be very popular with students as well, actually. That's one. Federal-state relations reform is another. I know you're actually on an important panel that the New South Wales government has set up in relation to federal-state relations reform, and I have a proposal in that area actually, which is about income tax sharing, not the disastrous idea that was floated by Malcolm Turnbull a few years ago, but I believe a more innovative idea. I'm not aware of anyone having previously floated this idea, but a proposal that I think would significantly realign the incentives of state governments themselves to be pro-growth and pro-jobs. And then lastly, energy market reform, which we spoke of a bit before, and which I think is critical because that's been one of the key underpinners of Australia's economic success, is the fact that we have had this tremendous comparative advantage in terms of low-cost energy. So they're three critical areas for productivity. There are key things that one could do in relation to participation. That is to try to, it's important to improve participation, not necessarily to lift it, because this is an area where actually there's a lot of confusion about what is a good outcome. You have to balance long-term demographic considerations against short-term economic growth and budgetary implications. But there are some significant proposals that I make in relation to that. In particular, I believe, quite novel proposal for a welfare reform proposal in relation to New Start allowance, which is designed to use the machinery of the higher education system, a sort of loan program to try to create a system where the government can save some money in terms of its welfare payments, which is important because we need to repair the budget. At the same time, it's still providing Australians who are down on their luck with the vital support they need to tide them through those difficult periods. And then last of all, I have a raft of proposals in relation to monetary policy and the operation of a financial system, which I think are also very important, and they're discussed at the end of the book.